A roadmap to seize a generational opportunity. That's how the federal government is describing its new strategy on critical minerals. What are those? Well, important minerals that go into everything from wiring to cell phones to batteries for electric vehicles. And Canada is sitting on a potential treasure trove. What you're looking at here is a soon-to-be operational lithium mine in Quebec. Lithium is a key component in electric vehicle batteries, and it's one of 6 critical minerals the federal government is prioritizing in its new strategy. But this country is way behind competitors on the world stage in extraction, processing, and manufacturing. So the key question now, can Canada capitalize on this strategy? Jonathan Wilkinson is Minister of Natural Resources. He's behind this strategy. He joins me now. Minister, you've heard the criticism that Canada doesn't have a good track record in recent years of getting big resource projects off the ground, and critics blame the regulatory process. How does this strategy change that?
Well, I think it changes it in a number of ways. First of all, I do hear that criticism at times, although I will tell you when I go to the United States, they actually say the reverse, which is Canada is actually a much better jurisdiction to get mining projects permitted than the United States is. But we also made changes to the environmental assessment process through the Impact Assessment Act, which was supported by the Mining Association of Canada, I should say, to try to ensure that there was greater certainty in terms of how we do that. Those rules have now been in place for a year. And what we've said in the strategy is we're focused very much on ensuring that we're implementing in a manner that's actually going to be able to expedite projects. That is going to start with creating a concierge service within the department, which is focused on critical minerals to try to actually work proponents through the system. We are internally looking at how we can actually expedite the processes that exist under the Impact Assessment Act and ensure that we are more than meeting the timelines in that act. And we're working with the provinces and territories to ensure we're not duplicating effort through the natural resource tables that I launched 6 months ago, is trying to ensure that we're aligning our regulatory and permitting processes. We have to go faster. It cannot take us 12 to 15 years to permit new mines in this country if we want to successfully advance the energy transition. So we need to go. We need to ensure we're doing it environmentally sustainably, working with our Indigenous partners and in respecting rights, but we need to go faster.
Well, let's look at a key area such as the Ring of Fire in Ontario, right? Critical minerals discovered there in around 2006. At the current rate, there's not going to be any mines up and running in that region until the 2030s. That's an example, I guess, of the issue that you need to fix, right? I mean, so when you look at those sorts of timelines, do you understand the doubts about the country's ability to execute on this strategy?
Well, I think that the Ring of Fire is actually not a particularly good example. There are many other projects that are advanced through the stages of assessment processes. In fact, I was part of announcing, the Government of Canada announced the approval of a palladium mine in Ontario just last week. The Ring of Fire is one where there are significant concerns on the part of Indigenous communities that need to be discussed. There are concerns on the part of environmentalists because it's an area of peat. It's a big carbon sink. And so the last thing you want to do is create a worse problem from a climate perspective. So we need to work our way through those issues. What I would say is we've launched a regional assessment to try to ensure that when projects come forward, they can be expedited. They can actually be dealt with expeditiously. But there are no projects that have actually started through the environmental assessment process in the Ring of Fire. There are many projects across this country that are either in the process or about to enter the process. So I am very optimistic about our ability to advance this work and to expedite the work.
So how do you ensure that Canada maximizes the values on these minerals so that it's not just extraction for export, but you also get into, because I know we have the battery plants and the electric car plants that we're building on, but there's that middle step, right, of refining and processing and all of that. So how do you capture that value as part of this strategy?
Well, this is an entire value chain strategy. I say this is a generational opportunity for Canadians across the country because it's not just extraction. It is about processing. It is about battery manufacturing. It's about product manufacturing, which include electric vehicles, but certainly much broader than that as well. And certainly we have seen targeted supports to try to ensure that we are getting facilities being built in Canada. You've heard Minister Champagne announce a number of battery manufacturing projects. But we're also seeing processing. I mean, there's a rare earth processing facility that we have supported in Saskatoon. It's processing rare earths that come from the first rare earth mine in Canada, which is in the Northwest Territories. So it's an entire value chain approach. And as I say, this is something that's actually going to create enormous wealth and economic opportunity, jobs in rural Canada, in urban Canada. But we have to be thoughtful, we have to be strategic, and we have to act. And that's what today was all about, is creating a roadmap through which we would act. I would tell you, I was standing, making the announcement with the chair of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition. This is an enormous economic opportunity, an enormous opportunity for economic reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and with the CEO of the Mining Association of Canada. I mean, this is really, really exciting for Canadians and for Canada.
Part of this is about national economic security as well, and we saw the changes to the Investment Canada Act that your colleague, Minister Champagne, rolled out this week, because China dominates a lot of this space right now, right? About 80% of global lithium processing, 60% of cobalt, 80% of graphite. All of these are priority minerals in your strategy. So how do you get around that stranglehold, and can Canada catch up to China, given its advantage at the moment?
Well, certainly, given what happened in Europe with the illegal invasion by Russia of Ukraine, and the resulting impacts on countries like Germany because of the dependence on oil and gas that came from Russia, I think everybody recognizes we cannot be as vulnerable with respect to critical minerals going forward. We must have our own ability, not just to extract, but to process. You are right, China right now does much of the minerals processing in the world. That is true for Canada. It's also true for our friends in Australia and in the United States. We are collaborators in this effort, not competitors. There is a huge market opportunity for all of us. And we need to ensure that we are working collaboratively with friendly democratic countries to ensure that we have security of supply for these things that we need to successfully prosecute the energy transition. I will tell you, not wanting to scoop myself, but I will be making an announcement in Montreal at COP with respect to international collaboration that is focused on respect for environmental protection, respect for Indigenous rights, and for labor standards. That is going to be an important part of actually moving this forward for Canada and for the rest of the democratic world.
Well, I would invite you to scoop yourself if you want to walk us through those details right now. And I have one more question. That having the minerals and having the strategy is one thing, but attracting the capital is another. And I know there have been some steps towards this in the recent fall economic statement from Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, but the U.S. is way ahead on this, right, with the Inflation Reduction Act. So what kind of catch-up have you got to do there? Because it stuck out to me that federal finance officials were calling these measures by President Biden a giant black hole for global capital, pulling it all to the U.S. So how do you fight that gravitational pull of our closest ally?
Well, I should start by saying, I think everybody who's concerned about climate change welcomed the Inflation Reduction Act. It was important that the Americans actually take steps, which they had not done for about 6 years. And much of that was catching up to what Canada has already been doing over the past 7 years. But there were areas, particularly some of the tax measures, where they went beyond what we have done to date. We responded to some of that in the fall economic statement with respect to hydrogen and the deployment of clean technology projects, where we've essentially matched what they have been doing from a tax perspective. But there's more that we need to do. I think minerals processing and battery manufacturing is one of those areas that we are looking at very actively. As we move towards budget 2023, we want to ensure this is a good place to invest. We do not want this to be a race to the bottom with the Americans in terms of tax incentives, but we need to make sure that we are competitive, and we are committed to doing just that.
Okay, Minister Wilkinson, thanks for your time.
All right, thank you very much.